involved in a tradition that just is part of America. The idea that you're going to tell your government you've had enough when it comes to them taxing and spending. You know, one thing I know about Americans is we hate being told what to do. We are a stubborn and tough lot,
Yeah.
and when our government's doing things like taxing and spending and borrowing and mortgaging our kids' future, we stand up and speak out about it. So there's just this stubborn streak we have. You know the old line for most Americans, when they're traveling down the highway and they see the sign that says 55, for most Americans that's not the limit, that's the challenge, right? That's the way we look at things. And it's again, it was there in 1773 in Boston Harbor. It was there a few years later in 1776 when people came together and started the greatest experiment in freedom and democracy the world's ever known. And the greatest country in the world is the result. And it's our job. You think about what really makes our country special. A lot of things. I mean, God has been so, His grace has been so wonderful in this country, and a lot of great rights and freedoms and privileges we have. But in the end, it's really parents making sacrifices for their children so they can have life a little better than we did. And then they, in turn, when they become adults, do the same thing for the next generation. And it's been that cycle that continues to make us the greatest nation ever. So thank you for being here today. Teddy Roosevelt said this. He said, "I preach not the life of ease, but rather the life of strenuous effort. Far better to dare mighty dreams, to attempt glorious triumphs, even though checkered by defeat, than to live in that gray twilight which knows neither victory nor defeat." I want to thank you all for being here today on this cold, ugly day. Being all here and having the courage to do what Americans have always done. Step off the sidelines, step out of the shadows, step out of the twilight, and get in the game. Because it's in the game where good things happen. It's in the game where things of meaning and significance take place. And you are doing what countless numbers of Americans have done for generations and generations. So we appreciate that. Understand this, and I won't talk too long here. We'll turn over to Jeff, who's doing a great job down in the state. George, Jeff right over here. He's going to be next. Understand this. Liberty, freedom, the words we most associate with this country. The words the founders talked about when they started. I tell people, next to Scripture, the greatest words ever put on paper are the Declaration of Independence, where the founders wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident. All are created equal, endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." It's interesting to know, you can't pursue happiness. You cannot go after your goals and your dreams if you first don't have liberty, if you first don't have freedom. And those two things are actually under attack right now in Washington, D.C. Think about this. 5 quick things I want to run through. The first one is this idea that we're going to now have a cap and trade a law put on the country where we're going to limit the amount of energy we have, direct assault on our economic freedom. Then we have this whole push to further nationalize health care. Another direct attack on our liberty. Instead of you and your family and your doctor making decisions about your health care, it's now going to be some federal board in Washington, D.C. deciding those things. Then we have this other issue. Have you heard of the card check issue? The idea that now, if you want to form a collective bargaining unit, you want to form a labor union, you now will no longer have the secret ballot, be able to use the secret ballot to make that decision. Direct assault on liberties and freedom. And of course, the two we're focused on today, 2 weeks ago when they passed this budget, largest tax increase in the nation's history contained in this budget. I actually offered a budget that balanced. Imagine that, doing what you guys have to do, what business owners have, balancing your budget. I actually offered one. I tell folks, the good news is we got 111 votes. The bad news is we didn't get 218, which is what you need to pass on. But there are a lot of folks who do think the way we. But largest tax increase in history, a direct attack on our freedoms, takes away our money that we could spend on our kids and our family and our goals and our dreams. And then the spending. You know, you've often heard tax and spend politicians. It's actually the other way around. It's spend and tax. Spending drives the equation. We've got to get spending under control. Think about this. In the next 6 years, what this current administration is going to add to the national debt is more than the previous 43 presidents combined. I tell people, from George to George, from Washington to Bush, we didn't pile up as much debt as they're going to in the next 6 years. In the next 10 years, we will take the national debt to $23 trillion. Now think about that number for a second. Think about what we have to do to pay it off. We first have to balance the budget, which I just told you we offered that budget 2 weeks ago that didn't pass. So we first have to get to balance. Then we have to run a $1 trillion surplus for 23 years, and that doesn't even count the interest. That's what we're leaving our kids and our grandkids. And that's why it's wrong, and that's why you're all here, and we appreciate the fact that you're here. It's a great country. Always remember, we're going to overcome whatever challenge is there. You think about this country. Think about this last weekend. Captain Phillips, the Navy SEALs, another demonstration out there. Think about Sully, who landed that plane in the Hudson River. Think about the guy a few years ago who stepped in front of the oncoming subway, Wesley Autry, the subway man I call him, to save just a fellow human being who was having a seizure. That characterizes the type of people we have in this country. We will get the job. It's not government that makes the country great. It's the people. Thank goodness the people always figured out before the politicians too. Great hallmark of this country. Two things I'll leave you with. Jefferson had a great line. He said, "When government fears the people, there is liberty. When people fear the government, there is tyranny." Now, with that statement in mind, ask yourself a question. If you leave here now and you go back to your office, and you get a knock on your door, and this particular day is kind of interesting. You get a knock on your door, and you go answer the door, and there's a gentleman standing there, and he identifies himself and says, "Hello, I'm Joe, and I'm from the IRS." Is your first response, "Oh joy, one of my public servants is here to help me today"? Of course not. So remember that great government freedoms increase when government stays small. That's what we got to work on. And finally, this we will deal with whatever comes along. I love this positive attitude that we're a stubborn people, but we're a positive people. And you all know the old story when the Israelites were camped against the Philistines, and every day the Philistine giant would go out and issue the challenge: who will fight Goliath? The Israelites' response was, "He's so big we can never defeat him." But David's response was, "He's so big I can't miss." That's the attitude we've had in America for 200 plus years. That's the attitude that started this country. That's the attitude that's on display today here in Findlay and all across this country, where people and families and taxpayers and citizens are coming together and saying, enough is enough. Practice some sanity in Washington. Get the spending, get the taxation under control, so we can continue to be the greatest nation in history. Thank you, and God bless you.